I'm Hartley Jafine. I'm an applied drama practitioner working in healthcare. I'm an infinite player seeking ways to regain play. We are all improvisers, improvising our way through life. Well, not this. This is scripted. I love theater and improv. But what I've noticed over the years of facilitating theater and improv with a variety of different groups is that the word theater and improv can strike fear into the hearts of many. Recently, I did a workshop with a group of people, and everyone entered the room really excited, and they looked around the room and they noticed there were no chairs. And they thought, okay, this is interesting. What are we going to be doing today? They had no idea. The person who was introducing me got up on stage and said, we're going to introduce Hartley. He'll be doing a workshop on theater and improv. And immediately, I noticed people in the room started to slowly back away from the center of the room and started to hide behind other people. That got me thinking, what's going on? We improvise constantly. Why are people afraid of engaging with improv and theater? And I think it's partly because of a couple of misconceptions around theater, drama, and improv. Misperception number one is that you need to be skilled to engage with it, which is not true. I'm an applied drama practitioner, which means I use theater in non-traditional theater spaces with participants who may or may not have any experience performing. For me, my background and my work uses theater and improv within health sciences training, looking at how to apply the rules of theater, drama, and improv to work with healthcare professionals to improve professional competencies, to build wellness and resiliency, and to enhance a comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty. There is no skill required for that. The other common misconception around improv is that it is inherently funny. Now, whenever I facilitate work, people have fun, and it can be funny, but the goal of improv isn't necessarily comedy. That's improv comedy, where the goal is humor. Improv is about storytelling collaboratively with another person without prearrangement. It's about communicating, collaborating, adapting, responding, listening, generating ideas, and being creative. Sounds a lot like life, no? And yet there is this fear of engaging with theater and improv. So at the outset, I always outline the rules that you need to know about engaging with theater and improv. Rule number one, you do not have to be funny, clever, witty, or smart. And usually I get a good phew from the group. And the reason why rule number one exists is because rules number 2 and 3 are all you really need to know. Rule number 2 is take care and support each other. And rule number 3 is say yes and. By saying yes and, you are able to take care and support the other people on stage. Those are the only really rules you need to know about engaging with serious play. And that's what theater and improv is, serious play. As Katie Watson defines it, serious play is engaging with an activity or an experience where the method is fun, but the content is serious. Serious play, as it turns out, is hard work. Now, to ask a question to our audience, when did you stop playing? I suspect there's not a specific moment that you can pinpoint. I imagine gradually over time, culturally, we start to stop playing for some reason. Gordon Mackenzie, in his book Orbiting the Giant Hairball, talks about going into elementary school classrooms and asking the students in grade 1, how many of you consider yourself to be artists, engaging with creativity, play, and joy? And in first grade, all the students put up their hand and said, me, enthusiastically. Grade 2, fewer hands, less enthusiasm. Grade 4, fewer hands, less enthusiasm. 5, fewer hands, less enthusiasm. As he went up the grades, Students who identified as being creative and playful got smaller and smaller. Why? What is happening? Part of it is our education system. Education doesn't always reward play. It doesn't reward creativity. It doesn't reward disruption. And also, part of the fear around play is that it's unpredictable. And while we think we want predictability, predictability can be very boring. I mean, imagine if today, everyone here listening to my talk had my talk memorized. Well, you would know where I was about to go with this speech. Instead, by embracing uncertainty, improv can happen, where 2 players or 3 players can build something together, responding, listening in real time. Now, I encourage and try my very best to apply the rules of improv to my daily life. How do I take care and support my family, friends, colleagues, strangers? And how do I do that by saying yes and? And think about that. How often do we apply the rules of improv to our daily life? Are you someone that often says yes and? Or are you someone that usually starts with a yes but? Or no? And whenever I encounter someone who has a differing viewpoint from me, so let's say someone who likes pineapple on pizza, I approach that using the rules of improv. Instead of hearing that someone likes pineapple on their pizza and saying, yeah, but, or no, instead, approaching it through the rules of improv with some curiosity. Oh, so you like pineapple on your pizza? Yes, and tell me more. I'm able to listen and build a conversation productively with that individual. There's no judgment. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'll agree, but it means that I'm able to build a conversation productively with the other actor in the stage. Now, the rules of improv have played a huge role in my life, as I suspect it has yours too. And the biggest improviser that I've ever played with is the late Del Harnish, who was the assistant dean of the Bachelor of Health Sciences program at McMaster University. In 2007, when I was finishing up graduate school, I ended up moving back from England to Canada, and I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I had a passion for theater and health, and that's all I knew. I knew about the BHSC program at Mac, and knew that Del was someone who was experimental and liked to try out new things. And so I found myself in a presentation that he was at. And during the Q&A, I noticed that he got up and snuck out of the room. And like any rational person, I chased him out the door, ran down the hall, and said, Del, can I have a moment of your time? And I explained to him who I was and what I did, and pitched offering a theater course within an undergraduate health science program. He looked at me and said, sure. Yes, and. And that yes, and launched me onto my career. From that point on, starting teaching theater in an undergraduate health science program, I've been able to look at how theater can be applied in undergraduate health education, professional health science training, continuing professional development across all healthcare professions, doctors, nurses, dentists. Now, whenever I tell people what it is that I do, I often get this common misperception. Oh, I get it. You're teaching doctors and nurses and dentists and dietitians how to fake empathy. Not quite. Instead, what I'm doing is making healthcare providers more aware of their performance. Thinking about if medicine is a performance, and if health is a performance, how is it performed? And how can theater and the rules of improv help that performance? It's not about teaching anyone how to fake empathy. To me, the idea of faking empathy goes back to the scripted performance, where someone enters a space and goes, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That is rehearsed. That is performed. Instead, I challenge healthcare providers to engage with improv, Go into a space and go, what brings you here today? Yes, and? Yes, and? Yes, and? Building that space collaboratively together without any prearrangement. It's not about falsehood, but it's about authenticity. That is the goal of improv. We perform every single day of our lives. I put on a costume today, as did you. When I go swimming, I wear a bathing suit. It's a different costume. We all have props. I've got my phone in my pocket, my watch on my wrist. We all perform constantly. And if we apply a performance studies paradigm to our lives, being more mindful of how we perform in everyday life, we can then hopefully improve that performance. For example, I'm going to ask everyone, while you're seated, to think of a banker, a high-powered banker, someone who has a lot of money. I want you to think, what is their sex? What is their gender? What do they look like? How do they physically present themselves? What do they sound like? And I want you to give this high-powered, very financially successful banker a name in your head. And in your head, on the count of 3, I want you to say that name in your own head. 1, 2, 3. Now think about that. How many of you had a banker who was white, who was male, who was middle-aged? This is an improv game. This is an improv game that makes us aware of some of the biases that we might hold about certain professions, about certain people. Again, no judgment. The point of this isn't to judge, but to make us aware, to raise a critical consciousness about how we perform in our everyday lives. Once we are aware, we can then look at ways to change. How can I think about things differently? How can I approach my performance, my improv, in a different way? We all perform in everyday life. We improvise daily. So, I ask that you improvise in your daily lives more mindfully. Take care of one another, say yes and build something beautifully, creatively together. Thank you.